All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of Essence20. Join me as we look at the powers, perks, focuses, and features of the Essence20 system to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today we are going to be diving into the realm of the Pink Ranger. Quick reminder, if you do enjoy this stuff, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. So, let's talk about this. So, Pink Ranger. The Pink Ranger is unique in Power Rangers in general, that as far as in the television series, the Pink Ranger is an exclusively female role. Now, if you go to the comics, there actually has been one male Pink Ranger that, if I remember correctly, was actually a member of the 1969 to the team that actually had a female Red Ranger as well. That was written into the comic during, or I think shortly after the Shattered Grid, either before or after Shattered Grid. But because of that, the Pink Ranger in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and most definitely in Super Sentai, which is where they get all their morph footage, or most of it from, the Pink Ranger tends to represent a lot of femininity. The vast majority of Pink Rangers, not all of them, but most of them, have a skirt, which is, in general, that's one of the easiest ways to tell a male ranger from a female ranger. The female rangers all wear skirts. They even made a joke about it effectively in Power Rangers, the newest one. It adapted Ryu's Soldier, Dino Fury. That's what it was called. Power Rangers Dino Fury, and then it turned into Cosmic Fury. So anyway, the Green Ranger in the Sentai was a dude, but in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, it was played by a character named Izzy, who was female. And so the first time Izzy morphs, her ranger suit has a skirt, and she immediately rips the skirt off and goes, "I've never really liked skirts." And then they could just use the footage from Super Sentai without having to kind of explain why the Pink Ranger has a skirt, but the Green Ranger, who's also female, doesn't have a skirt. They've never really felt the need to explain why Trini never had a skirt, and she was a female Yellow Ranger, but but her counterpart in Super Sentai was male, so she just didn't have one. But yeah, so the Pink Ranger in general, when you look through the kind of history of Power Rangers, they tend to have relatively kind of feminine roles outside of their morphed form. Like, a good example, Lightspeed Rescue, which is one of my favorite series, if for no other reason than the intro song for Lightspeed Rescue is amazing. But anyway, the Pink Ranger in Lightspeed Rescue was a medical professional. I don't know if they ever specifically state what her job was. I think she might have been a paramedic. But she always wore a stethoscope, because that's how you know they're a doctor. Doctors have nothing if they don't have a stethoscope. It's one of the greatest scenes in the entire series was during the final episode of Super Megaforce. They're doing the massive legendary war, and so all these old Rangers are coming back, and the way that they're introducing them, they're showing all of these kind of crises in different parts of the world, and then a Ranger will just kind of show up. And one of them, there was like an explosion or something, and suddenly you see this dude in a fireman's jacket looking thing running over, and you notice that it's Carter, who is the Red Ranger from Lightspeed Rescue. And then you watch as the pink Lightspeed Rescue, I can't remember her name right now, because I'm bad with names, folks. You see her rush in to help as well. And so this dude has just had something fall on him or something. So he's looking pretty rough. She takes her stethoscope, puts it vaguely in the area of his chest. Doesn't actually put it on his chest, but just vaguely in the area of his chest. And then, like, takes a few seconds to listen to the nothing because a stethoscope doesn't work at range. And then goes, "You're going to be okay." It is hilarious. Anyway, so Pink Rangers in general are going to have a bit of a more feminine feature to their suits, obviously. And they tend to also be kind of the emotional core of the group as well. Another thing that is really, really common with Pink Rangers in general is they tend to be ranged. Their power weapons tend to be ranged, and a lot of them, like it's an impressive amount, have a bow. The first Pink Ranger in Mighty Morphin had a bow. Lost Galaxy had a bow. I think Samurai had a bow. Like, they just over and over and over again, they can't really figure out anything else to give the Pink Ranger but a bow. Now, that being said, when we look at the actual features of this class, she uses her bow really well. To the point where the alternate name that I gave the Pink Ranger was the Sharpshooter, because so much of her kit involves using her bow in various ways, particularly to hit enemies from range. So that's, I mean, the probably the largest departure from the kind of traditional Pink Ranger that you tend to see over and over again is Jen Scott's, who was the Time Force Pink Ranger. She was the second female leader of a Power Rangers team, the first one being the White Aquitar Ranger. But she was the first Earth-based female leader of a Power Rangers team, and she was the first Pink Ranger leader of the Power Rangers. And she, I don't want to say that Jen was not feminine or anything like that, because she very much could be when she wanted to, but she was very aggressive. Not aggressive, assertive. That's the word I want to go. She was very assertive. She was very much in command. She's just a really, really badass Ranger, for lack of a better descriptor. Jen was really, really cool and amazing. But other than that, like, Pink Rangers tend to be Pink Ranger, Pink Ranger, Pink Ranger. Another kind of unique aspect about the Pink Ranger, it doesn't show up in every single series. And when there isn't a Pink Ranger, they tend to be replaced with a White Ranger. Specifically, a White Ranger with pink accents. That was one of the things that Kaku Ranger, which is the suits and the footage that they used for the Mighty Morphin Alien Rangers, that was one of the things that was so unique about the White Aquitar Ranger. Was not only was she a female leader of Rangers, but she was also the first female White Ranger that didn't have pink accents. So white and pink tend to be kind of interchangeable when they're played by a female Ranger. When you have a White Ranger that's a male, they tend to be a sixth Ranger. So that being said, I think it's time for us to actually look at the features of this role. Moving on. So, starting off, the first thing that you talk about is their personal power. This is another fast recharging Power Ranger. They start with a personal power capacity of 2. They get all the way up to 14 when they max out, and their personal power regeneration is 4 power per day. So they are, again, very similar to the Blue Ranger. They are going to be built a little bit more around using their personal power points to augment the things that they do. One of the big differences between the Blue Ranger and the Pink Ranger that we'll find out in just a little bit here is while the Blue Ranger, most of their uses for their personal power are going to be a little bit more focused on grid powers and things like that. The Pink Ranger gets actually a few extremely useful uses for their personal power, and they actually get one of those uses right at level 1. So this is the first Ranger role that we've dealt with that actually has a use for their personal power right at level 1 built into their role. It's not built into anything else from the character. So that's that. As far as training, this is also the first Power Ranger role that doesn't have medium armor proficiency. This Ranger only gets light armor proficiency. And as far as their essence scores, speed is going to be their number 1 essence score. And we will find out later that this class really excels specifically in speed skills. They use acrobatics for an alarming number of different things, with them being ranged focused and their table perk being focused on ranged attacks. Targeting is going to be incredibly useful for them. And they're also going to physically just be very fast. The second highest essence score increase that they get is social, which again kind of leans back towards the idea of the Pink Ranger being a little bit more of the heart and kind of heart anchor of the group, and the emotional anchor of the group. Pink Rangers in general tend to be very empathetic. And so having a high social score will allow players to kind of lean into that role of being able to influence people better than some of the other characters. After that, their third most increased is going to be smarts, and then their fourth most increased is going to be strength. This is not designed to be an incredibly strong character. But that also means that hit point wise, again, the only way that you get additional hit points is by investing in the conditioning skill in strength, or by certain perks and the things like that. So the Pink Ranger is going to run into the issue that they're just not going to be able to have as many hit points as a lot of their other Ranger counterparts, and their armor is going to be relatively low. Again, they only get light armor, so because their speed is so high, that also is going to mean that their evasion defense is very high. So they will probably be doing a lot more evasion than ever really using their toughness defense, unless there really is no there's no other choice for that. So yeah, those are the basic features of the Pink Ranger role. Moving on. That was impressive. I just went like 7 pages. All right. At first level, you get 2 things. The first thing you get is it's Morphin time. Talked about it's Morphin time many times before. The Black Ranger episode, I actually go into detail about how all the different aspects of its Morphin time works. If you want a more detailed explanation, go watch that one. You can go to the timestamp and just watch that part. I don't want to re-explain it every single video because it doesn't change. They increase their toughness. Your jump distances are tripled. As a free action, you can summon your power weapon, and if you're reduced to 0 hit points, you can avoid defeat by automatically turning to your natural form unconscious at 1 health. That's its Morphin time. However, we need to talk about the first real ability, and that is Volley. I've mentioned the term before. Volley is the table perk or the table feature. What I mean by that is on the Pink Ranger table, they have a bunch of different columns. One of the columns is volley shots. Every single roll has what's called a table feature. Or a table perk. That's what I call them. The reason I call them that is there is a perk that you can take that allows you to effectively take a perk from another role. It's kind of a pseudo multi-classing style thing. The limitation on that is you cannot take anything that has a column on the roll table. So these table perks or table features are unique specifically to that ranger. No other ranger can have this feature. Volley is the table perk for the Pink Ranger, and it is intense to say the least. It's also worded kind of weird, and you don't really understand the entirety of it until we look at their fifth level ability, Penetrating Shot. So I will explain the specifics here, despite the fact that they're not explained super well. That's one of the downfalls of the core book of the Power Rangers role-playing game. Because it was the first Essence20 book, it's not particularly well written as far as clarity is concerned. And they actually had to make some statements and things like that to clarify quite a bit of the stuff in here. And then in the G.I. Joe core book, and then finally by the Transformers core book, they actually reworded aspects of it to make it significantly easier to understand and be significantly more clear. So let's talk about Volley. By spending one personal power, you may make a special volley action as long as you do not move. This volley attack action allows you to make a number of ranged attacks against valid targets equal to the volley shot's number listed on the table above. Range, cover, and other modifiers apply to these targets individually. Volley effectively allows the Pink Ranger at level 1 to make multiple attacks against different targets. Now, it doesn't technically say specifically they have to be against different targets, but Penetrating Shot modifies Volley at level 5 to allow you to make all your attacks against a single target. So just by virtue of that, I would rule that Volley has to be used against multiple targets. But again, it's a really useful thing, especially at first level. One thing that I don't talk about quite as much in Essence20, but I talked about it a lot in my D&D Deep Dive series. Action economy is a really powerful thing in just about any RPG. The action economy in Essence20 is not quite as touchy as it was in D&D 5th edition. D&D 5th edition, it was really simple to figure out which side had an advantage in combat. It was literally whichever side had more things they could do in a single turn. More actions, bonus actions, whatever. Whichever side could do more things, whether it's through multi-attack, whether it's from extra attack, the ability to use bonus actions to do things, the ability to use reactions reliably. Whichever side had more always had the advantage. It's not quite as big a deal in the Essence20 system, but action economy is still important no matter what RPG you're dealing with. And Volley allows you to turn your single standard action into, at level 1, 2 different attacks. You get more and more as you level up. But it changes the action economy, especially since, first of all, it's a ranged attack. So you can attack people effectively on opposite sides of the battlefield as long as they're in the right range increment for you. And depending on the targets that you pick, you might be able to get rid of a lot of kind of minion style creatures, depending on how much damage your weapon does. It could be very easy for a Pink Ranger to show up, especially at higher levels. And if you have, maybe half a dozen putties there, the Pink Ranger on their first turn can just take their bows out, go out volley, and get rid of most of them with a single action to leave the rest of the team to either deal with the remaining putties or, what's significantly more likely, to deal with the monster of the week or whatever other big deal is going on. It also means for game masters understanding that throwing a lot of like 1 hit point or 2 hit point creatures at a Pink Ranger, even just a low level Pink Ranger, is going to mean that they are probably going to take them out relatively quickly, which isn't a bad thing. One of the things that I loved from 4th edition D&D was they had a certain kind of monster called a minion. And basically all a minion was it worked like a normal monster. It would do generally the same amount of damage and things like that a normal monster of its level would. However, it had only 1 hit point. And so the entire purpose of minions was you would throw like half a dozen or a dozen of them at the enemies or at the players, and the players could just sit there and cleave through like 5 or 6 of them in a single area attack. And it made the players feel really, really strong and powerful, but it also gave the DM the ability to kind of wear down resources and things like that, while still being able to have really strong monsters for them to have to be a little more tactical on. So Volley really, especially once we start getting to higher levels and we start seeing things like additional damage that the Pink Ranger gets on her attacks, Volley effectively turns into a minion buster. So when you have a Pink Ranger on the team, that's one of the things that's going to be the most useful thing you can do, especially at low levels, is, okay, don't worry, guys. By the way, good game design or good encounter design for Power Rangers, especially if you have a Pink Ranger on the team, you do not want all of your combat encounters for the lose condition to be the enemies take out all your hit points, or the win condition to be just eliminate all of the enemies. That turns very, very boring, and with a power like Volley, it becomes very, very simple. You should have things like the putties attack in the middle of a park, and so in addition to having to take out the putties, you also have to save the civilians, or the putties attack a power station and they're trying to break the power station so that Angel Grove no longer has electricity. Always have an alternate thing, like an actual purpose for the putties to be there other than just to harass the Rangers. That will make Volley still be a very useful ability, but it won't make it the thing that just kind of ends every encounter. So yeah, going back to how to use Volley for players, again, they do specifically mention range, cover, and other modifiers apply to these targets individually. So when you're picking your targets for Volley, again, picking targets that you can just take out with 1 or 2 hit points is useful, but really just ensuring that you are helping your team as much as possible is going to be the best use of your Volley. You want to look at, okay, do I have, do I have an ally that's surrounded by 3 or 4 putties? Maybe I'll do all my Volley shots against those, so that even if I don't take them all out, it's going to help them to be able to get to a better spot. Or if you're first, first going, you might specifically pick targets out that you can go, well, if I can take these targets out, that will actually create a hole in their defense, so that our Green Ranger can run up and start solo striking the big baddie while the rest of us deal with the enemies. Volley is not specifically going to just be, how many targets can I take out, or how much max damage can I do? There's a tactical element to it, again, depending on how your GM runs the things, that you should be looking at, okay, where are these attacks going to give me the most bang for my buck? Is it going to be having them all hit minions and possibly take a few minions out? Is it better for me to, make sure that I hit the monster of the week plus this, or maybe one of the generals in here is in here. So you hit a few of the minions, but then you also hit a general just to kind of go, hey, I see you there, and you're not going to be able to sit back and just watch your minions attack. Think about the best places that you can use this to help the rest of your team. And remember the different the things that your the different abilities that your teammates have. Again, speaking about the Green Ranger, which is what our last episode was. Solo Strike requires them to be able to get an enemy that's not adjacent to one of the Green Rangers as allies. So if the Green Ranger is in a place that they can't move without getting attacked by enemies, or can't get to a spot that they can separate an enemy away so that they can get their Solo Strike, then think about just getting rid of some of the enemies around the Green Ranger that's preventing them from getting that Solo Strike ability going off. And other things like that. I'm using Green Ranger because that's the role that we've discussed thus far that has the most kind of tactical aspects to their ability. But obviously, if your Black Ranger only has like a few power points left to kind of dole out healing, if that was the Black Ranger, I might be confusing roles again because it's been a long day, folks. Oh wait, no, there's a Blue Ranger. So yeah, maybe your Blue Ranger's running low on power points to be able to heal, and so you kind of work with the Blue Ranger. If I'm going to get rid of most of the targets over here, so this person you're not going to have to worry about healing, because I can get rid of most of the people that are going to attack them, heal this other person. Again, teamwork makes the dream work. All right, so that's Volley. Moving on. At second level, you get two different abilities. The first is called Hard Target. As part of a move action, you are allowed to roll your acrobatics skill to augment your evasion score by the results until the beginning of your next turn. This is a weird one. Because I don't think this is right. So the PDF that I have is the original PDF. There's none of the errata or anything put into this. If you make an acrobatics skill roll, theoretically, because skill checks in general, it's a d20 plus your skill die. So theoretically, you could get a 20 on the d20 and then also add on. So you could increase your evasion score by like 26. Like, that is a completely legitimate thing. And that, I don't think that's what this is supposed to do, because that would just be bonkers. Even if you rolled a really, really bad roll, adding 6 to your evasion is still really, really good. So I think, and this is how I would rule it at my table, even if this isn't the way it's meant to be, I think it's supposed to be, as part of your move action, you are allowed to roll your acrobatic skill die to augment your evasion score by the result until the beginning of your next turn. They don't specifically say your acrobatic skill die, but basically, Hard Target allows you, as part of a move action, to increase your evasion score. Which again, we've already talked about. Your toughness defense is not going to be super great. You already are probably not going to have a super high strength score. You can't wear anything higher than light armor. You're really not going to be using toughness a lot. Hard Target is going to allow you to augment your evasion score, probably higher than anyone else on your team. And that effectively means that the Pink Ranger can be very, very tanky, for lack of a better term. They can become very, very difficult to hit. The qualifying aspect of this ability is it's as part of a move action. So in order to use Hard Target, first of all, you can't use Volley and Hard Target in the same turn, because Volley requires you to not move. Hard target requires you to take a move action. Second of all, if you can't move for whatever reason, if you are trapped, if there are enemies in the way and they're not allowing you to move, anything little like that, you wouldn't be able to use hard target because you have to be able to move. So to play a Pink Ranger as well as possible, what's generally most important is you need to be mobile. You're already a ranged attacker, so staying as far away from the enemy as you can, first of all, is going to benefit your ability to get your volley shots off when you need them to do, because attacking with a ranged weapon when an enemy is really close puts a snag on your attack. But in addition to that, if you want to be able to use a hard target, you need to be able to move. And with hard target, you basically do get to make that decision of, do I want to volley and hit a bunch of different targets, or do I want to hard target and move and only get to make one attack this turn? The nice thing about hard target, there's no resource tied to hard target. It's not like you have to burn a personal power to do it. It doesn't require you to use a story point or anything. It's just as part of your move action, you're allowed to roll your acrobatic skill and add that to your evasion until the beginning of your next turn. So with hard target, basically if you only have one enemy, at this point, volley really isn't going to be very useful to you. Or maybe you only have, two enemies and your volley has gotten large enough that you can normally hit more than that. It's not going to be the most beneficial thing that you can do. So pop on a hard target, move, and then pick your target that you're going to attack, or maybe use a grid power that you've gotten to do something else, or like there's a lot of different things that you can do. Yeah. So your big choice with the Pink Ranger is generally going to be, am I going to be volleying this turn, or am I going to be hard target this turn? And that's going to kind of dictate your role on the battlefield throughout the game. So, yeah, moving on. The other second level ability you get is Fleet of Foot. Your ground movement is increased by a certain amount while morphed. Your morph ground movement is increased by an additional amount at a higher level. Fleet of Foot is relatively simple, but in the idea that it is effectively two sentences, but it does massively expand how you play the character. In D&D, I would call a character like this hypermobile. What that effectively means is you can move faster than the rest of your team, and a lot of times you can also move faster than your enemies. Your kind of base movement in the Power Rangers role-playing game is going to be 30 feet. Most characters, that's what your movement is. With Fleet of Foot, you're going to be able to move more than 30 feet. What specifically? I do this in every one of these. I would never want people to be able to use my videos as a way to just avoid buying the books. So I leave out certain key details that if you want to know them, pick up the book. There's tons of different ways to get it. I have the PDF. I have the physical copy as well, because I got them when they were first released. You can get them in Amazon. You can get them on your at your friendly local game store. There's lots of different places to get them. So anyway, being hypermobile changes a lot of things, especially for a ranged character. You can do a term that comes from MMOs. You can effectively kite enemies. And because the Pink Ranger's second highest score is social, that's another thing that I think the Essence20 system, I think, just has a step up on a lot of other systems. Just because the social skills don't specifically have one that says like, this is how you insult someone and cause damage, it doesn't mean that you can't use social skills in combat. And with Fleet of Foot, depending on how fast the enemy is, you could very easily Use something like, I'm going to actually look up what the skills are before I shoot my mouth off. Essence scores and skills. Social-based skills. So you could very easily use deception or persuasion to effectively try and get the enemy to kind of focus on you. You know, shoot them a couple times, insult them with persuasion, or use deception to make them... or there's even a specialization under deception called distraction. Skill at keeping others' attention on you rather than the world around them through misdirection. Specifically using deception and with a distraction specialization, you could use that to get the enemy to focus on you and start chasing you. You can continue running. Again, using hard target just in case they get close enough to hurt you or they use a ranged attack against you. And basically kite the enemy away while the rest of the Rangers either follow a little along or do other things that are required in the scene. Again, if you have a really good Game Master, they're going to give you situations where your goal is not going to be, hey, kill this monster. It's going to be, hey, take out this monster before it gets all these civilians in trouble, or before it destroys the dam that will end up flooding Angel Grove, or a million other things. Those make significantly more interesting combat. Your Pink Ranger, through Fleet of Foot and Hard Target, becomes a really, really good, for lack of a better term, off-tank. It can be really, really useful at distracting an enemy and getting them to chase them while they're just kind of peppering away, while staying relatively unhurt because of that. So don't think that Fleet of Foot is exclusively, oh, I can move more. Think about all the different things that additional movement is going to get you, especially when you are a ranged character. Maybe you use Fleet of Foot because it gives you additional speed to or it gives you additional movement. Maybe you use that to be able to make it up to a higher point where enemies simply can't get to you without having to make some kind of roll to physically get up there, and basically get yourself to a sniper position. Or again, use it to kite around enemies, or even better, just use it to get to a line of fire that allows you to attack targets from maybe a different angle, or even to be able to attack portions of the environment to give your allies a benefit. Maybe there's a boulder on a cliff that by moving significantly, you can get to a point where you can shoot it and make it roll in a direction where it's not going to hurt your allies, but it is going to hurt your enemies. So additional movement is always useful for a creative player. Never undervalue a game giving you additional movement, because there's so much that you can do with it. All right, moving on. The next few levels are the same for every single Ranger. The one kind of weird thing with this is the Pink Ranger actually gets 2 different 5th level abilities that are unique to the Pink Ranger. So I'm going to skip over those just to very quickly talk about 3rd level, you get your Zord. 4th level, you get your General Perk. And 6th level, you start getting Grid powers. Zords are exactly what they sound like. You get your Zord, and you get to customize it and do really cool stuff. General Perks are effectively feats from 4th edition. Grid powers are kind of like feats as well, but they're more specifically aimed towards giving you new abilities that work with your Ranger. There's a lot of different grid powers. With the fact that the Pink Ranger does have a really fast personal power recovery, you can look at grid powers as a way to kind of augment your Pink Ranger to give them more abilities. But understand, Volley, your table perk, is going to be one of the things that you're probably going to be using your personal power on relatively often. So you might want to focus on grid powers that don't require spending personal power. Or if you find yourself just not using Volley as much, maybe you do want to have grid powers that give you an alternate use for your personal power. It's all up to you. So yeah, moving on. At 5th level, again, you get two different things. The first thing is called Penetrating Shot. And this is the one where, after reading it, I understood how Volley was supposed to work. Because, again, Volley doesn't specifically state that you can't make multiple attacks against a single target. However, Penetrating Shot, normally I skip a little bit of the text just because I don't want to read the flavor because it doesn't have a mechanical benefit. But I'm going to read the whole thing here just so you can understand where I'm coming from. At 5th level, your aim with your ranged power weapon is so steady that you can direct a number of shots into the same exact point, delivering a punishing amount of damage to one target. By spending an additional 1 personal power when using the Volley feature, you can choose to make a single attack roll against a single target that will apply to all of the shots from the Volley. This attack gains a number of upshifts equal to the additional shots after the first made in the Volley. So Penetrating Shot is basically the single target version of Volley. And this changes things drastically. It costs 2 personal power because, again, Volley costs 1 personal power, and then Penetrating Shot costs an additional personal power. So this is not a super cheap ability, but 2 personal power is not a massive amount, especially for a character that eventually maxes out at 14. And at 5th level, your Volley Shot is 4. Your Volley Shot is 3 at 5th level. So Penetrating Shot effectively means you can make 3 attacks against a single target. And the interesting thing about this is, first of all, it's 1 attack roll for all 3 attacks. So as long as you hit with all 3. You don't have to worry about missing. Second thing, you get a number of upshifts. So this is where things start to get really, really interesting. The way that critical hits work in the Essence20 system. When you roll a skill test, you roll a d20 and you will roll a skill die. It's based on how many ranks you have in that skill. Your skill dice starts as a d2 and goes up d4, d6, d8, d10, d12. The way that a critical hit works is if you roll the maximum amount on your skill die, it counts as a critical success. And in combat, a critical success means that you get to add an additional effect to the attack, which can mean you just do the damage twice, but they can also mean if you have an alternate effect for your weapon, let's say that maybe you have an alternate effect of move. You're able to maneuver an enemy with your weapon. When you get a critical effect, you can do the normal thing, and whether or not your alternate effect requires a downshift or something doesn't matter at that point. You just get the effect. So you can put a maneuver in, or maybe if your weapon does a type of energy, each different energy to the type and each different damage type has a different alternate effect that it can do. Getting a critical hit allows you to just add that on, or again, just do the damage twice. The interesting thing about that is when you start dealing with specialization. Specialization is effectively when you roll a specialized skill. Like if you specialize specifically in power weapon targeting attacks, instead of just rolling a single skill die, you roll every single skill die up to and including the one that you would normally roll. So if you have a D8 in your targeting skill and you have a specialization in power weapon targeting attacks, then what you would roll is you would roll your D20, and you also roll a D2, a D4, a D6, and a D8, and you choose whichever one has the highest roll of those 4 dice. However, with how critical hits work is other than the D2, you can't crit on a D2. If any of the other dice crit, or if any of the other dice roll their maximum, that means that that attack counts as a critical hit, even if you don't do that one. So for example, say your D2 got a 1, your D4 got a 4, your D6 got a 3 and your D8 got a 5, we're going to use the D8 because that's the highest number. However, because you rolled a 4 on that D4, it still counts as a critical success. So when you're dealing with upshifts on a specialized skill, all that's doing is giving you additional chances to crit and become significantly better for you. And with this one, because you do one attack roll that makes all the attack hits, if you crit on that attack roll, it means every single attack crits. Penetrating Shot turns the Pink Ranger into a pretty cool, interesting character. It turns them from a pretty cool, interesting character to a death-dealing machine. Especially if you learn how to farm critical hits. This can become an absolute death sentence, especially if you modify your power weapon to do additional damage or have something a little like that. We'll talk about later. Eventually, you get things built into the class that just allows you to do additional damage on attacks. Penetrating Shot becomes devastating. So understand it is a single target shot. So your choice now becomes Volley. I can hit a lot of different characters, which if you're or enemies, which if you're combining that with another ranger that also has kind of area of effects, both of you together can take out 4, 5, 6 different monsters in a single turn by each of you doing 1 or 2 points of damage each to them. You can do a lot of stuff. So Volley, still useful. However, if there's only one target or there's one target in particular that needs to be gone, they're getting close to civilians and you really don't have any choice, or it's the big baddie and the rest of the team's doing poorly, Penetrating Shot is where it's at. And by the time you get to 5th level, you want to have a specialization that you can use when you're using your power weapon. Because again, the Volley and the Penetrating Shot both require you to use your power weapon. I think I glossed over that fact. For Volley, your Pink Ranger skills with a ranged power weapon are such as you can use your Morphin Grid power, blah, blah. Same thing with Penetrating Shot. Your aim with your ranged power weapon. So this is not going to be something that you can use with your Blade Blaster. This is going to be something that you need to use your power weapon for. That also means if the Blue Ranger takes one of their grid techs that increases your power weapon damage, that's going to increase your Penetrating Shot. Which also means, like, even if, let's say you just do 2 damage on an attack instead of 1. With Penetrating Shot, at level 5, you can make 3 attacks. With Penetrating Shot, you hit and you crit with that one roll because you have you have 2 upshifts on that. You already have a pretty high thing. That means your first attack would normally do 2 damage, but because of the crit, you can add on additional effect. If you just do the damage twice, that's 4 damage. And then you have 2 more attacks that each do 4 damage apiece. So you've just done 12 damage in a single attack, which in the Essence20 system is bonkers nonsense amounts of damage. Most attacks do 1 or 2, and at high levels you might do 3 or 4 damage on a single attack. You can one-shot a lot of the real big baddies if you can get a crit and you can get something that increases the amount of damage that your power weapon does. And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. Again, there's an entire equipment building system. If you want to min-max this character, they can be devastating. So, yeah, moving on. For a note for GMs, that also means the idea of just sending a single really powerful monster against a team with a Pink Ranger is not going to be fun. Because the Pink Ranger is going to take a massive chunk out of their health really quickly, and then the rest of the Rangers are going to just whittle it down. If there's a Pink Ranger on the battlefield, send multiple enemies. Because that's going to give the Pink Ranger still the ability to feel really powerful and do really cool things, but it's not going to make the encounters trivial. So, yeah. Moving on. Also at 5th level, you get Group Strike. After spending 1 personal power, you choose a 10-foot by 10-foot area within range and line of sight and make a ranged attack roll against all targets in that area. The area of effect increases to 15 by 15 later on, and then eventually to 20 by 20. Group Strike, again, you're getting an area attack. It costs you a personal power. The first question I had, and I think everyone should have, is, well, Group Strike lets you attack multiple targets, but they all have to be next to each other. Volley lets me attack multiple targets, and they can be anywhere within range. Well, the difference is going to be, again, at 5th level, Volley, you only get 3 attacks. A 10 foot by 10 foot area can have up to 4 characters in it. And when you get to 15 by 15, that's 9. 20 by 20, that's 16 different characters. Now, the likelihood of 16 characters all being in what I affectionately call fireball formation, which is where they all stand in a real little spot, it's going to be relatively low. However, if you have rangers that have the ability to maneuver enemies into places, that can be really, really useful to use Group Strike. In addition, if you get grid powers or modification to your power weapon or anything else, excuse me, that allows you to maneuver enemies, you can maneuver enemies into a place where you can get a Group Strike and do a pretty decent amount. And again, it's a ranged attack roll, and it doesn't specifically say how much damage that it does. But it does say you can split the energy blast from your power weapon to a shower of smaller blasts. Yeah, it doesn't specifically say how much. So I'm going to say that it does the damage of a single attack from your power weapon just in an area. So, yeah, again, a lot of playing a Pink Ranger is going to be kind of choosing what is the best use of my personal power. Volley, I can attack basically any targets within range, but I have a limited number of those. Group Strike, I can hit an area. So sometimes Group Strike is going to be a better use of your attack than Volley. The other thing that's nice about Group Strike is Group Strike doesn't require you to not move. Both Volley and Penetrating Shot, you can't move. So Group Strike means you can combine Group Strike with Hard Target to be able to be mobile, doing area damage, and having pretty decent defense as well. So yeah, understand that if you need to move, maybe you want to focus on Group Strike. If you don't need to move, or if there's a bunch of enemies right in the same area, Group Strike's going to be great. Otherwise, Volley, if you don't need to move, is going to be useful. Penetrating Shot is going to be very useful if you only have a single target. This gives you, again, a lot of different choices. And I've said this many, many times before. Good game design gives you choices. Bad game design gives you right answers. None of these abilities are going to be the right answer every single time. However, there are going to be situations where they are the best answer. So, yeah. Moving on. At 7th level, you get Sidestep. Sidestep is the same ability that the Green Ranger role has. We talked about it before. The Green Ranger role, it really didn't fit super, super well for the Green Ranger. It's slightly better for the Pink Ranger. When you are subjected to an attack that has an area of effect that targets your evasion, you may spend a point of personal power to reduce the attack results by the number rolled on your acrobatics skill die. So, Sidestep makes slightly more sense for the Pink Ranger. First of all, they're hypermobile. With Hard Target, that can mean that your evasion is already going to be relatively high. And so effectively, what Sidestep allows you to do is burn a power point to it doesn't technically work this way, but numbers-wise, it's the same result. It effectively allows you to add your acrobatics skill die twice to your evasion. Because the first time you're actually adding it to your evasion from hard target. The second time you're removing that result from the enemy, which is effectively the same thing. Adding a negative number or subtracting a number from another one. It's the same thing. It's with the reflexive property or something of math. So Sidestep technically slightly better for the Pink Ranger than the Green Ranger, because the Green Ranger wasn't quite as focused on speed. They're a little bit more strength focused. But it's still not a particularly great thing. Now, they do specifically say, when you are subjected to an attack that has an area of effect that targets your evasion, you may spend a point of personal power to reduce the attack results by the number rolled on your acrobatic skill die. It doesn't say if you have to do this before you see the roll or afterwards. If you have to choose before you see the roll, this ability becomes significantly less useful, to the point where you have significantly better uses for your powers. If your GM decides to rule that you could wait until you see the attack result to see if it's going to be useful, Sidestep becomes a little bit more useful, because you'll know if you need to use it or not, and then it's just an additional power point to possibly prevent yourself from getting hit by something that could be relatively devastating. And again, Pink Rangers generally aren't going to have as many hit points as other Rangers, because their strength score is so low, or their strength essence is so low, that they're not going to be able to invest as many points into conditioning as other Rangers can. So, yeah, overall, I'm not a huge fan of Sidestep. If any of you guys are familiar with D&D 5th edition, it's the evasion skill from D&D 5th edition that rogues and rangers get, and there's a few other classes too. Monks get it eventually as well. Evasion is a very useful skill in D&D 5th edition, because it deals with saving throws. There aren't such a thing as saving throws in Essence20, so they had to modify how the ability works to still give an evasion-like ability, and I just don't think it translates super well into Essence20. But your mileage may vary. So, moving on. I'm going to loop this in with the next ability, because all the other level 7 ability you get is extra attack. You get extra attack. You can attack twice instead of once whenever you take the attack action on your turn, and it only functions when morphed and fighting as an individual. So if you're in a Megazord, you don't get extra attack, and if you're not morphed, you don't get extra attack. By the time you are getting extra attack, your volley is helps if I actually go to the right place. There we go. Your volley is already doing relatively well, where it will give you more attacks than your extra attack. So extra attack is not kind of reducing the usefulness of a volley in any way, shape, or form. However, as you get higher and higher and higher, your volley and penetrating shot becomes significantly more useful. And then extra attack is really when you can't use those. Maybe you're saving personal power. Maybe you have to move this turn. Extra attack is going to be useful for just being able to get some more damage out there. But that's really it. At 9th level, though, this is where things massively change. At 9th level, you get penetrating shot. If you do not move on your turn, your ranged combat now inflicts an additional point of damage if they hit. At a higher level, the bonus damage is increased to 2 damage. So, precision aim works really well with both volley and penetrating shot, because again, you can't move when you're using precision aim. That being said, if you don't move, penetrating shot has just gotten a lot more deadly. Again, combining precision aim with a Blue Ranger's grid tech perk that gives you additional damage on power weapon attacks, plus modifying your power weapon to either do additional damage or have some sort of additional effect means that, first of all, Volley is going to become significantly more useful for you, because even when the minions are having 2, 3, 4 hit points, you're still able to kind of volley them out of existence. And Penetrating Shot, again, becomes incredible. If we just look to crunch some numbers real quick. And I want to specifically go to the modifications you can make to weapons. So weapon upgrades. I believe there is an upgrade that just does additional damage, and I can't remember which one it is. Automated smash, rumbling, tasing, blah, 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 blah. It's got to be a relatively high one. I don't know. Anyway, I believe there is a an ability that allows you to just make your weapons do increased damage, or modification that lets you do additional damage with your weapons. But because I can't think about it, let's just do number crunching without that. Let's go Grid Tech perk that gives you additional damage on power weapons. Your basic attack does 1 damage, which is pretty standard. Grid Pick turns it to 2 damage. Precision Aim turns it to 3 damage. And at 9th level, your volley shots have moved up to 4 attacks. So a single penetrating shot without critting can do 3 times 4, so that's 12. With critting, that's 24 damage. And with penetrating shot, because you have 4 attacks, you are getting 3 upshifts on that attack. And if you're specialized in it, which you should be at this point, you are doing exceptionally well. And then when you get to the higher level one increases to 2 damage, that means each one of your individual attacks does 4 damage. So that means that even with just 4 attacks, which by the time you get that high up, you'll have more. But even with just 4 attacks, 4 times 4 is 16. Double that if you could crit, that's 32 damage. That is an insane amount of damage. It's absolute nonsense. So yeah, Precision Aim, again, turns the Pink Ranger into a death dealer. They absolutely can outdamage, I believe, any other ranger on the field, depending on what other perks and grid powers that they get. You know, if you get a Battleizer or something, a lot of times that will massively change how things work. But as far as just pure damage amount, if things roll right for a Pink Ranger, they are deadly. And it also means that fleet of foot that you have can become increasingly more useful, because again, if you can get to a place where you can attack them and they can't attack you, and you can just sit there launching pot shots with volley and penetrating shot, your enemies are effectively going to have to change their tactics to avoid you, not the other way around. So yeah, really, really powerful. This is where I say this about rogues in D&D 5th edition. Rogues are just this shy of being broken. And Pink Rangers are just this shy of being broken. The big limitation to a Pink Ranger is penetrating shot does require 2 personal power. So understand, if you're GMing a Pink Ranger, make sure they're keeping track of their personal power, because that can end things very, very quickly. Moving on. Surprisingly enough, the Pink Ranger doesn't get anything else until 20th level. You get Pink Ranger Prime. Every spectrum roll in the Power Rangers, this is RPG, the 20th level ability is Pink Ranger Prime, or is Spectrum Color Ranger Prime, and they all do very similar things. They will always give you a +2 bonus to all defenses, and they will give you an edge on something. On this one, you get an edge on speed skill checks, which again starts to get kind of nonsense, because now targeting is a speed skill. So that means all of your attacks with your power weapon, which is already doing crazy amounts of damage, now has an edge. If you're not familiar with the term, edge is the equivalent of advantage in D&D 5th edition. You roll the d20 twice, you take the higher of the two rolls. So by the time you get to 20th level, you're generally just not missing your attacks. You've probably invested a lot into your targeting skill. And you're never missing your attacks anymore. In addition to that, you also get some other thing that happens with a prime skill. For the Pink Ranger, you get an additional point of damage on targeting attacks. So when we stack that with precision aim, and again, if you have a Blue Ranger that took the Power Weapon Grid perk, you are now doing at 20th level, you're doing, even if your weapon only does 1 base damage, you do 1 base damage from that, you get 1 base damage from the Greed Tech. You get 2 base damage from precision aim, so that brings you up to 4 damage per attack. And then Pink Ranger Prime gives you an additional point of damage on targeting attacks. That is 5 points of damage per attack. And if you do penetrating shot at its maximum level, you can get 6 shots. So quick math, without a crit, you can do 30 points of damage on a single penetrating shot. Or you get a crit from rolling any of those things, or just getting enough upshifts that it gets to an auto crit. That is 60 points of damage without modifying your weapon. And another thing that I keep kind of glossing over, because I'm just talking about big numbers here, is the fact that getting a critical hit on a weapon, on an attack in the Essence20 system means you get to add an additional effect to the damage, which the easiest thing to do is to the attack. The easiest thing to do is you just make it do the same damage again. However, because of how penetrating shot is worded and everything like that, if you build your power weapon to give you a bunch of different alternate effects, whenever you do a penetrating shot and you crit, yes, you can put it all into damage, which can be very, very satisfying. But at the exact same time, if you have like 3 or 4 different alternate effects for your attacks, you can just stack each one of them on each attack. Each attack is going to do the regular damage, and then you can add 1 additional effect on each one of these attacks. So getting it to have a bunch of different energy types that it can it can gain access to, you can just add on all these additional effects and do crazy nonsense kind of things. The same thing is true about Volley. If you are getting crits on it, is each individual target that you hit with Volley, you can do a different effect on if you get a critical hit. You don't get the upshifts that you get with penetrating shot, but you're still, if you're specialized in it and you've increased the die as high as you can, by the time you're level 20, you probably could have a D12 targeting. There's a good chance that you're going to be critting on a fairly regular basis, and if you build your power weapon correctly, one of the things that you can focus on is just giving yourself a bunch of different effects that your power weapon can do to really turn you into a very versatile character. One of the things that blew people away when they started playing Baldur's Gate 3 was they would run into enemies that were using crossbows that also got Battlemaster abilities, where they could use a crossbow and trip you from 30 feet away. Or they could knock you off a cliff from 60 feet away. And it was really, really powerful, because a lot of D&D players, when they think of the Battlemaster maneuvers, they generally think of them as, fighter. You go in, you fight things with a sword or a big axe or something. A ranged fighter that can use Battlemaster maneuvers is deadly. That was one of the reasons I built my card thrower as a Battlemaster, because I could throw cards that would knock people away. I could throw cards that would give them the fear condition. Like, I would use that to just throw these status effects out from 60 feet away. With the Pink Ranger, if you build your power weapon correctly, you can be that style of character. Give your power weapon a bunch of different, through equipment upgrades and things like that you'd have to work with your GM over. give them a bunch of different ways to do different things. Give them maneuvering. Basically, turn your character into Hawkeye with a bunch of different arrows that, well, this is going to be my maneuvering arrow that allows me to pull them closer. And this is going to be my impact arrow that allows me to throw them away. This one allows me to trip them up, and this one allows me to do this and this and this. The Pink Ranger can become a really, really powerful character that does a lot of different things. Even something as simple as being able to stun at range can be incredibly useful, especially with Volley. If you give your power weapon the ability to stun and Volley, you can stun half the enemy without missing a beat, while the rest of the Rangers go in and either take out the stunned enemies or just focus on the ones that aren't stunned. You can effectively become a ranged monk. So there's so many different really interesting things that you can do. So yeah, anyway, that is Pink Ranger Prime. Moving on to final thoughts. As I said before, the Pink Ranger, if you want to build them as a death dealer, 100% can be a death dealer. It's one of the reasons why I call them the sharpshooter. They are deadly with a bow. But simply because big damage numbers are fun does not mean that that is the only thing that you can do. If you work with your GM and possibly your Blue Ranger to modify your power weapon to give you a bunch of different status effects or other kind of controlled style of abilities built into your weapon that all just require you to choose a different effect when you attack, you can turn the Pink Ranger effectively into your team's Hawkeye, and they can be deadly on the battlefield. Not from just being able to kill a bunch of enemies, but from the ability, especially if your GM is doing interesting things like this attack is happening with a bunch of civilians. The ability for the Pink Ranger to basically just throw enemies away from civilians and using your additional fleet of foot movement to get to the right angle to be able to knock the putties or the cogs or the Tengu warriors or whatever exists, being able to knock them away from civilians and then tell the civilians, hey, run that way, I'll make sure they can't get to you. Or being able to tie up enemies so that they can't run and, go do the things that they want to do. That can be unbelievably effective on the battlefield, more so than just being able to, rain down death from above. So understand that while, yes, if you want to create your Silver Ranger to effectively turn them, or your Pink Ranger, and effectively turn them into a Ranger Slayer, which if you don't know who the Ranger Slayer is, check out the Shattered Grid comic series. Ranger Slayer is probably one of the coolest characters that has ever been created. They have a cape, they look super, super badass, and their bow is a sword. It's actually a double-sided sword. It's super, super cool. You got to check it out. But if you want to create your Ranger Slayer style Pink Ranger, you can totally go that way. But you can also go the exact opposite way of, I'm going to create my Hawkeye Ranger, to where I have all of these different alternative effects that I can use. And depending on the situation, sometimes dealing damage is going to be where it's at. Obviously, this role is built around dealing damage. When you look at Precision Aim, just giving you additional damage, and then Pink Ranger Prime just giving you additional damage. That's how it works. However, it can be just as effective, if not more so effective, to be able to stun and trip and tie up and a bunch of different things, to be able to maneuver various characters. All these different things can be massively, massively useful and can make it a lot more fun to play your Pink Ranger. So definitely look at interesting ways you can build your Pink Ranger to create interesting ideas and to be able to fit a lot of different situations. Again, the thing that makes tabletop RPGs so much fun is they're not video games. The GM doesn't have to come up with every possible use of your ability before they write the encounter. So it can be just as effective to, instead of attacking the oozlings in front of you, to shoot the wire of the large heavy object hanging above them and squash them all, a la Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie. Look at the environments that you're around. As you play your Pink Ranger more, start realizing that, wow, maybe if I do this or maybe if I do that, maybe I'll give my bow the ability, or gun or whatever you want to do, I'll give it the ability to do cold damage so that if we're ever fighting near something that can freeze, I can use that to my advantage. I can freeze water to walk on it. I can freeze water that enemies are in to keep them there. I can see water pipes if we're fighting in a place with water pipes. I can freeze water pipes and cause them to burst, possibly pushing enemies off of a high ledge or something like that. Be creative. I think that's where playing a Pink Ranger is going to be the most fun. And just playing ranged characters in general is a lot more fun when you can get creative about the things other than just going, I shoot the guy. Is he dead now? Anyway, that gonna be all for me today. As always, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those things are super, super important. In the comments down below, of course, I have to ask you, who is your favorite Pink Ranger? I'm a huge fan of Kimberly, the original Pink Ranger. She will always be near and dear to my heart. However, there are some pretty badass Pink Rangers out there. I will particularly mention the Mystic Force. I really love Power Rangers Mystic Force. It's one of my favorite seasons. The Mystic Force Pink Ranger is super awesome. I love her. I love just the kind of fierceness that she has. I love how she interacts with Maddie, who is my personal favorite. The blue Mystic Force Ranger. She is my favorite Mystic Force Ranger. The rest of them are cool. Like Xander. Xander's a great guy. Love the accent and everything. But Maddie is just amazing. I love Maddie. Yeah, and I can never... I have a hard time remembering the names, so I can't remember what the Pink Rangers... I'm going to look it up before I say the wrong thing. Let's go. Pink Mystic Ranger. Vita! That's her name. Vita. Vita was massively cool. She had a badass haircut. She looked awesome in her outfit. Like, everything is just super, super cool. Gotta love Vita. So anyway, first of all, let me know what your favorite Pink Ranger is in the comments down below. And you can say both of these. How would you want your Pink Ranger to work? Do you want to be the Ranger Slayer Death from Above style character? Do you want to build them as a more Hawkeye style character that has a bunch of different trick arrows or trick shells or whatever like that if you're using some kind of gun type weapon? Or do you want to do something completely different from that? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys in the next time. All right? Bye-bye.